Nathan, welcome to the podcast. I'm very excited. This is our very first podcast episode. And you didn't know this was going to be a podcast until like 5 minutes ago.
That's all good. Good to
Yeah,
be here.
thank you so much. Yeah, so to get us started, I'm curious, you grew up in Auckland, New Zealand, and you lived in like London, LA, and obviously many, many years in Tokyo. But what is your first recollection of like Japan and like what really inspired you to, eventually move here?
My first experience, I think, was when we had two girls from Japanese junior high school come and stay with us for
Oh,
one
wow.
week or 2 weeks, like a homestay exchange.
Mhm.
And they didn't speak much English. I had zero Japanese, but it was fun. It was fun to get to know them a little bit.
Mhm.
They giggled a lot. They snuck out and bought snacks a lot. Um, so there was just sort of these quirky qualities, I guess, that they
Mhm.
exhibited, and it was interesting and unique and different from what I knew in New Zealand. I was about 6 or 7 at that time.
Mhm.
And then a little later, I remember watching this show. I think it was a British show on TV. There was a salaryman in his suit walking with his briefcase to
Mhm.
work in Japan. And he suddenly looked at his watch and realized, oh no, I'm going to be late. And so he opened his briefcase and unpacked it, and it turned into a go-kart. And he hopped in and he rode to work. And I
Mhm.
thought, wherever that future is, I want to be there. And it turned out that that was Japan. That was an innovation from Honda. I don't know if they actually made it into
Mm.
production, but
Mhm.
it was just interesting and exciting. And I think then I was 8 or 9. So it was exciting to think that there was a country in the world that was thinking about the future in different ways than we were in New Zealand, where it was a lot of
Mhm.
farming and agriculture and good lifestyle, but not necessarily as future facing as what
Mm,
that looked like on the TV. Plus, this was, I was growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s. And so at that time, Japan was still the future, certainly in the 90s, before the bubble
mm,
burst. Japan was the future. And so I wanted to be wherever the future was. There was that love for Japan or interest in Japan, but there was
mhm,
that deep love of design no matter where in the world I might be. And so that's what led to choosing design school. I studied design in New Zealand first.
mhm.
And then after a few months of working in New Zealand after graduating, I moved to London and worked as a graphic designer there. So
Yeah, and how was your transition to Japan? Like you obviously like had a little bit of exposure and connection, but how did the actual, career building start in Japan?
yeah, so I was in London, working odd jobs and loving the idea of being in a big city like London. It was
Mm.
exciting, different every day, lots to see and do, but it was also not that fun in the winter. Um, Not as cold as continental Europe, but it's
Mm.
somehow dreary and gray for many
Right.
days of the year, and that was getting to me. And so I wanted to move to a big city where it was
Mhm.
exciting. I wanted to move to a city that didn't speak English, so I would be
Yeah.
challenged every day.
Mhm.
And I wanted to move to a place where design and art and architecture was cherished. But ultimately thought maybe I'll go back to Japan now. And so looked for ways to get to Japan, not necessarily as a designer right off, but to get there somehow. And the easiest way to get into Japan as an English speaker is to teach English.
Mhm.
So from London, I got a job with a company to teach English in Japan and wrapped up my time in London. Went home to pack a few things in New Zealand and then made my way to, at that time, Yokohama, but
Mhm.
soon Tokyo. That's how I got here. And that was a good way to land with a bit of a cushion. And it
Mhm.
might be different today. Things might be a little bit easier, but not a lot easier. So all of that was a really great way to get exposure for the first few months before starting to get on my feet and look for design jobs. I was lucky enough to find a job. It was an English media company producing magazines and websites for the English speaking business
Mhm.
community in Japan. So most of the staff were foreigners and everybody spoke English in the office, even the Japanese people. and our work was in English. So again, that was a bit of a bridge, and I think that bridge is helpful both from a in terms of an entry point or
Mm,
making it easier and more comfortable to kind of ease into things, but also as a place that I guess I felt comfortable for all of my time in Japan.
mm,
We might get to this a bit later, but I will never be Japanese. One look at me, and you can tell that I will never be Japanese, no matter
mm,
how long I stay here, no matter how good my Japanese might be, no matter how many times I become a citizen, it doesn't matter. I'm not Japanese. And so
mm,
that's something to get used to as a foreigner in Japan. I
mm,
think there are other places like New Zealand or England where you can naturalize and become a citizen of that country and be just as accepted as any other citizen in that country. The US is another example. Whereas in Japan, unless you are Japanese, you'll never be Japanese. And that is a
mm,
line that you cannot cross. I've never met a foreigner who's managed to step across that line. And I don't see a future today where that will be a
mm,
possibility. So that is something to be aware of and get used to.
mm,
And so those bridges I think are helpful, and it can be helpful to be and to thrive as a foreigner in Japan.
mm. Is that like identity piece like something that you were aware of before coming to Japan? And like if you could, give some advice or, like heads up to any foreigners who are just starting their life in Japan, like what would you tell them?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. There's still a very deep sense of pride and honor in being Japanese, and I
Mm,
respect that. Although as a foreigner, it can be, again, it's that line. It can be tough to crack or tough to even imagine cracking. And so
yeah.
I guess advice is to be aware of that, to acknowledge it and respect it and honor it and use it the way you will. That can be used as an advantage by being outside, and you can play up your role as an outsider in a positive way. There's a lot of respect from a lot of Japanese people for people from other countries as well. But it also depends on your, I think, industry and career path and your attitude as well. So long as you're aware of these things, you take them in your stride and you respect them. We are in their country, more or less. And so there are rules in Japan. There are many rules in Japan. And I think it's important to make yourself aware of those rules and familiar with those rules. Some of them are unspoken and unwritten rules, so those take
Mhm.
learning in other ways. For me, it's been a matter of immersing myself in Japanese culture so that I can absorb those unspoken cultural norms or rules or guidelines in a way that helps me to navigate life in Japan in a way that is respectful to others around me, as well as respectful to my own background and upbringing and who I am as a person. I'm not going to change who I am, but I'm also going to be respectful of other people that I meet.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like now with the sudden rise of tourism and a lot of foreigners without understanding the Japanese like rules, like both like spoken and unspoken, causing some disturbance to the Japanese community, and that is creating like a lot of backlash to, foreigners in general. And that's for another conversation, but this is like a very important like reminder to like everyone as well. Yeah, and going back to your, experience, like getting the first design job in Japan, like what was the process like, especially establishing yourself as an actual designer, not like English teacher and just like one of many, many foreigners in Japan? Like what was the, initial career like setup like?
Again, I was fortunate that I found a bridge that very first job. So the
Hmm.
CEO was from New Zealand. He'd spent
Oh.
many, many years in Japan, so he knew both countries very well. My colleagues were from the US, France, Germany, Canada, the UK, and Japan, and I'm probably forgetting some. So that gave us really interesting conversations to have at lunchtime. So we'd all go out for lunch together. It was a small team. We were close knit. They'd all been in Japan longer than I had, so they had lots of advice they could share with me. I was there for about a year and a half, and then the next job was very interesting. Again, each step is another stepping stone across the
Hmm.
river. And so obviously there was a connection between that job and the next one. Things were starting to crumble a little bit at the previous job. And so I was telling my group that it was time to look for the next thing, as many of them were too. And one
Mm,
friend said, well, actually, one of my friends has just left their job and they're looking for a new designer. Maybe you could interview there. And their
mhm,
friend was Japanese, and this was a very Japanese company. So I thought my
mm.
chances are so slim, but hey, I've got nothing to lose. Let's
Right.
go. I sent them my portfolio through my friend, and they came back a week later saying they want to meet you. So
Mm,
at this point, I've only worked in English. I've picked up some casual Japanese in
mm.
bars and restaurants with friends, and I get to this interview and it's in Japanese. And I've got the CEO, the COO, the creative director, and the hiring manager sitting across from me. They're all in their 40s or older, and I'm in my 20s. And luckily, I wore a suit, but I didn't wear a tie. And they're all suit and tie, and it's very formal, and the whole thing is in Japanese, and it's probably one of the most painful hours I've had in Japan. I think I understood about half of what they said, and then my answers probably didn't make a whole lot of sense. I can't imagine what I actually said, but the whole thing's a blur, and I don't really remember much. But I walked out, and I thought, well, I gave that a shot, but there's no chance that I'm getting that job. And then a few days later, I get a call from the hiring manager, and he's still only speaking Japanese. And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't understand what you just said." And he laughed and said, "We want to work with you." And I thought, "Oh, wow, that's crazy." But what it
Yeah.
was a small, very traditional, very Japanese ad agency, family run, family style.
Uh-huh.
Was looking for a foreigner designer to kind of bring some different ideas, bring some fresh ideas and fresh perspective to their team. Their team was 100% Japanese. They had one American part-time copywriter, and they had another
Mm,
assistant who was Japanese, but she'd spent many years in the US. And one or two other people spoke some English, but
yeah.
I spent the next year and a half working there primarily in Japanese. All of our clients were Japanese. All of our meetings were in Japanese. All of our presentations were in Japanese.
Wow.
Everything was in Japanese. And all the emails, like it was 100% immersion, which was good for my Japanese language, of course. I made so many mistakes, really embarrassing mistakes, like career breaking mistakes, but they gave me a chance. I guess that's another lesson. I call it the
Mm.
gaijin card, gaijin being casual or gaikokujin, foreigner. The gaikokujin card, the gaijin card is a card you can play like an ace
Mm,
because you're different, because you're outside, because you're not from here. Nobody expects you to know how to be Japanese or to be Japanese because you're
mhm,
not Japanese. And so
mhm,
that can feel difficult on some days, but it can also be a license to be creative on other days.
mm,
And so, as a creative in a creative company, as the foreigner, I got a lot of creative license and leeway to do things my way, and that was fun.
mhm,
That was liberating. It was a very traditional company, so nobody leaves until the CEO goes home. The CEO might be
mhm,
sitting in their office reading the paper at 7 p.m. They could go home, but they've chosen not to. Maybe they're reading something
mm,
important. Maybe they're just reading the jokes. I don't know, but they're still at the office, so you can't leave.
mm,
But I'm like, it's 6 p.m. I've done a day's work. I've got friends that I want to go out with, so I'm out. I'm playing my Gaijin card, and I'm going to leave at 6 p.m.
mhm,
because those were my hours, and that's what we'd agreed to. And so nobody stopped me. But the others in my team couldn't leave because the CEO was still there, and they were playing by the local rules. So
mm,
again, playing the Gaijin card, living by my rules. I don't know what people thought. I don't know what the CEO thought. He never mentioned it to me.
mm,
Nobody ever mentioned it to me, but I felt I was within my rights based on the contract that we had signed. And I would share that with a few friends, and nobody thought I was doing anything grotesquely wrong. But I'm guessing that probably didn't win me too many points in the office. But you've also got to protect your work-life balance and
mhm,
protect your sanity when you are an outsider in an experience like this. And Sometimes that means doing things your own way. I think that's fine. So long as you're still being respectful to the others. I still got my work done. I
Mhm.
didn't want to go home if I was going to make somebody wait or if we had a presentation the next day. But I also thought, I've worked a full day. I've worked 10 hours. I can go home. Like I'm
Mhm.
allowed to go home. And so I'm going to. One day, and I heard this crunch, and I looked down the aisle, and my colleague, two seats down, had basically fallen and headbutted her
Oh.
keyboard because she was so tired from all the hours she was doing. And I thought, I don't ever want to be like that. Like, I feel
Mhm.
terrible for her. We talked later, and she was just exhausted. Um, but I didn't want to succumb to a work culture like that. Even though I was learning so much from this company and this team, I also wanted to protect my personal life and my social life and my outside of work life.
Yeah, hopefully no company is doing that still, but
I'm
if
sure they are.
they are, I think it's a good reminder, like and also to Japanese people who are listening to this too, like you really don't have to put up with those like BS, and as long as you're getting your work done and you are doing the work you're contracted to. So I think it's a great reminder. And on the flip side, like you have very traditional like Japanese corporate life, but you also started your own company. So please tell us about your like entrepreneurial journey in Japan as a foreigner. What was that like?
The timing was really good. In 2006, they changed the laws that made it easier to start a company.
Mm-hmm.
And before you had, I think you might have had to be a Japanese citizen, I'm not sure, but
Oh, wow.
foreigners were allowed to open companies. You needed a lot less capital to open a company. And I came across a person who could help me. He had lived and worked in the US, but he was from Japan, so he also understood the Japanese business culture, and he was from accounting and KPMG and that kind of background. So he was setting up a business to help not just foreigners, but founders start new businesses. And so he
Mhm.
provided lots of services that I was going to need. And a friend who I grew up with in New Zealand had also moved to Japan. And he was working at the Hyatt at the time. And the Hyatt needed a new e-commerce website. And he invited me, amongst other companies, to pitch for that job. And ultimately, we won that job. So it was sort of a accumulation of these things coming together, the stars aligning, where I had a big project which was going to, if we were successful, was going to be long term. The law had changed in our favor, so we could start a business much easier. And I had met somebody that was going to help me set it up. So I went for it. I left that traditional company and started the business. And we worked full time, we being a small team, including some people I'd met at the previous job and some of their friends and a couple of other people that we'd met along the way. And we just put together a small team. My intention was not to hire a bunch of people and build a big studio. It was to keep it small and lean and ideally encourage other people to start their own businesses and for us to
Mm.
work together as partners as opposed to employer employee.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so people were keen on that idea. And so this gave them too a license to take that big step and have a project and some people to work with. And so we worked on that first project and we were successful and we won the long-term contract. And so that gave us sort of a bread and butter to keep going for a while. And we slowly but surely brought on new clients and other projects and things like that. So it never got big, but the intention wasn't to make it big. The intention
Mm-hmm.
was to try this out and see how it goes and see what it's like. I was still young in my 20s, and so there was sort of nothing to lose. And yeah, I guess I felt like there was no real fear to be felt by
Mm.
trying this. If it failed, I could find a job. I wasn't married, I didn't have dependents, so that was the time to try it. And it was fun. It was exhilarating. It was calling my own shots, working with clients that I want to work with, and working in a way that wasn't traditional Japanese or locked into any kind of pattern or anything like that. It was the way we wanted to work and the type of work we wanted to do, the type of clients we wanted to work with. So that was fun.
How did you go about finding like the clients and like your teammates? Like, were they mostly English speakers in Japan?
Yeah, pretty much all English speakers. So I guess that was the niche that we played in. It was primarily building websites or providing design services for foreigners in Japan looking to a local and international audience and market.
Mm.
So restaurants, hotels, different services that were catering to a broader audience. And again, that being on the edge means that you can build a niche quite easily. You already are a niche, so you
Yeah.
might as well take advantage of that and
Mm.
play in that space. And there weren't that many people doing it, so there wasn't a lot of competition. If I were to do it again today, I would do it very differently, but that's mainly because of all of the things that I've learned through my career between now and then,
Mhm.
both in terms of the hard skills, in terms of design and research and running a studio, but also the soft skills in terms of designing the purpose of the organization first and designing the values and then attracting people through those values. Really, back then, it was friends of friends. Like, okay, we really like what you did for us. We're going to introduce you to this other friend who also needs your
Mhm.
services, and word of mouth traveled. So I think that's true of anywhere. If you work hard and you do a good job and you provide a good service for people, they're going to recommend you to their friends or to their networks, and you can do very well that way. Again, we weren't trying to be big. We were just trying to keep the lights on and keep the interesting projects coming in. And we did that for a few years before things changed again. So it was relatively short-lived, although it was the longest I'd ever worked at one place to that point.
And then what happens? So you've done, English teaching, which is what a lot of people try out first in Japan, and then join a smaller company, join like many very traditional Japanese company, and then started your own thing. And what is next in your journey in Japan?
Yeah, so roughly halfway through that time of running my own company, another friend from New Zealand who also had strong ties with Japan came to me with the idea of building an online education platform, and he had the educational background and the business background, and I had the design and the building background. So we thought together we could build something pretty cool. And I also
Mhm.
have an interest in education as well, so it seemed like a really great recipe or setup. So we worked on that for several years. That would have been a great direction or path had this other thing not come along. Another friend was a lawyer at Disney and in Japan, and for some reason, the legal team and the creative team in Disney Japan sat next to each other. So he was very good friends with the head of creative at Disney, and he
Mhm.
said, "You're both foreigners in Japan. You're both designers. You should totally meet and have a drink." So he
Mm.
introduced us. We went out for a drink, and we got along really well. And then a couple of months later, he gave me a call and asked if I'd ever thought of working at a company like Disney, which I hadn't. Um, and I thought, hmm. And so we talked, and he sort of explained the type of work that they were doing and where he saw a role for me. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, I'm happy doing these projects that we're working on. I'm happy with this
Mhm.
online startup. And we hadn't really gotten it off the ground. We'd launched, but there was still a lot of work to do. Ultimately, I thought at the end I have to take this opportunity to learn what great creative looks like. And I think a company like Disney is, if
Mm.
nothing else, a very exceptional creative company, doing things at a scale like not many companies can do. So I was going to learn things that were extremely unique and I think empowering for my career. So ultimately, I had to take the opportunity and spend about 4 years with Disney Japan, and then got an opportunity to transfer to Disney in the US as well. So that was a door that opened that I had to step through, and I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, and that is also a very, very unique experience of like working for an American company in both like Japan and their headquarters in LA. So what are some of the like differences that you observed in different offices and like what are the, kind of universal core things to Disney?
Yeah, I think I was very lucky also to start in Japan first and then move to headquarters in the US.
Mm,
Had it been the other way around, it would have been a different experience. But my experience was Japan first. I didn't really have much to do with Disney headquarters for those first few years. Disney Japan was extremely successful, and I think it still is. We had a lot of creative freedom to do what we wanted to do in Japan because business was good. And so
Mm,
that gave us an opportunity to do some really interesting things. We were also catering to an audience that I hadn't really designed for before, like young adult females in their 20s, 30s, 40s with disposable incomes and a willingness and desire to spend that disposable income on Disney.
mhm.
We designed a lot of pink things and a lot of cute and kawaii things. On the flip side of that, I think the sort of general sense of pride in Japan means that people want to do things their own way in Japan. Like
Mm,
a lot of different parts of the Disney international company will inherit the assets and the direction from the US.
mhm,
And many of them are willing and ready to take that on because it
mhm,
means that they save their budgets for
mhm.
other needs. But a lot of that creative will come from California. Whereas in Japan, partly because the market was so neat, unique, and partly because we had a really good team, and partly because people wanted to do it the Japanese way,
Yeah.
um, we would get things from California and take a look and go, okay, that's what they're doing, and do our own thing. And it was
Is
really
it
fun.
mostly Japanese people working at this point?
Yes,
Okay.
although the person who hired me, he was from the UK, and there were
Hmm.
a few foreigners. The GM was from America, but most other people were from Japan,
Okay.
and they all spoke English to varying degrees. And they had chosen to work at a company like Disney, so they were open to working in an American company, working with
Mm,
foreigners, hoping to speak English, many of them. So they were more open than your average person in Japan to
hmm.
speak English with you. And I think all of those things, again, that was one of those bridges or those places on the edge for me where it was a
Mm,
company with, the subsidiary in Japan, people from Japan willing to work with foreigners and foreigners in Japan with the desire to work in Japan and with Japanese people. So we were all sort of at the edge together. And I think that made things a lot easier for me. And then when people would come from headquarters to speak at our town halls or anything like that, of course, that was all in English with Japanese subtitles or what have you. So it was kind of an English first environment or a
mm.
foreign first environment for me, which made things easier, even though I was the not the underdog, but the minority.
Minority, yeah.
Yeah, things were catered more in my direction. Sometimes,
Hmm.
not all the time. Daily activity was often in Japanese. Knowing that a lot of my colleagues in the Disney office in Japan had probably come from a traditional Japanese company before, whether it was marketing or sales or
Hmm.
what have you. But that was relief for them to come to a foreign company, see that
Yeah.
things were done differently, things
Yeah.
were more open. There was no strict dress code. There was no strict hours. It was a different environment, more freeing and
Hmm.
liberating, I think, for a lot of them. Those were some of the highlights in Japan, and then
Hmm.
the US was completely different. It was much more corporate
Mm.
and very American, and so
What do you mean by American?
there was a lot of competition, competitive
Mm.
culture, even internally. And so this was a striking difference to what I had experienced in Japan. Um, and just nothing right or wrong about either, just different. And one because of its roots in Japan, and the other because of its roots in the US. They were very different cultures. That said, I think it really does also depend on the team within a large organization that you happen to find yourself in. So the reason I transferred to the US was because we got an internal email once, I think they were monthly, and right down the bottom of this one email was, and I'm probably one of the few people in the Japan office reading these because they're all in English. Scroll right to the bottom, and there's this banner saying Disney Innovation. And the word innovation was exciting to me. I wanted to work on innovative projects. And they had opened a new team called Disney Innovation Group in the US. And they were going to be working on exciting new projects. That's all it said. Didn't say much. But if you were interested, we're looking for people. We're looking for designers. We're looking for engineers. We're looking for product people. Reach out, and there was an email address. And so I reached out and many months of phone calls and interviews and visa conversations later, I was transferring to the US. So I specifically sought out that team, found out who was behind the team and what work they were doing or what work they had done. They had done really innovative work. They had been a startup that Disney had acquired, and the
Mm,
startup specialized in social media and viral video campaigns, and they had done
mm,
some amazing work. And I thought, well, they're really smart people and creative people. I would like to work with them. And
mm,
so I sought out that team. I think in a big company, you want to seek out the team or the teams and the people that you want to work with more so than the company. It's
mm,
that's the reason why I was able to stay at one company for almost 10 years was because I was able to move around and find really great teams. My first team was amazing, and then that second team was also amazing, and basically those were the two teams I spent my Disney career with. And had it not been for those amazing teams and people and projects, I might have left earlier. But it's such a big company that you can move around and stay interested and stay engaged and stay excited with your work, more so maybe than a smaller company.
Do you have any advice about like how to find those smaller like niche teams or like spaces within a larger company, especially, like Jalper does offer those like unique opportunities for, like very like ambitious smart students abroad and like speaking English. And most of the time, like those roles are not just regular new grads roles that are kind of horizontal to other Japanese students. So I'm sure like the other students who are listening to this are curious about those opportunities, but I want to know like how you would evaluate and find those opportunities in a larger organizations.
So for me, I think besides design, the other word that's kept me curious through my career is innovation, and I think it's still relevant. And most large companies in Japan these days have innovation groups, and some of them are doing better work than others. Some of them are more authentic than others.
Mm,
But I would say if you know what industry or industries you're interested in, seek out those companies that are leading in those industries and then find their innovation groups, whether they are innovating in sustainability or operations or ways of working and HR or the products and services that they build.
mm,
For example, after Disney, I worked at IDEO, and one of the projects we worked on was helping Mitsui,
mm,
one of the huge trading companies in Japan. And they have businesses and organizations around the world and hundreds and
mm,
thousands of employees. Mitsui came to IDEO because Mitsui wanted to launch an innovation lab. They wanted
mm,
to have one studio in Silicon Valley and one studio in Tokyo, and they wanted to basically build like a mini IDEO inside of Mitsui that would help them incubate new business ideas. And it was about incubating the business ideas from their current employees. And so I would say seek out those companies. They might have subsidiaries or branches or innovation teams in other parts of the world, whether that's Silicon Valley or Tel Aviv or London or New York, depending on the industry, depending on the business. I would suggest seeking those companies and seeking those groups and reaching out. I've no problem with cold calling and cold emailing people. Like the worst thing that can happen is they don't reply.
mm.
So you wasted a few minutes of your time to send a cold email. But the best thing that could happen is that they fly you across the world and you land in a role that will be the stepping stone to your future. There are these opportunities there. You just need to start looking and
Mhm.
see who you can find. And obviously, LinkedIn is a great resource for finding people and going down rabbit holes until you find the right person to ping and hi and express your interest or your passion for what it seems they're doing and invite them to a very brief call to get to know more about them and what they're doing and to share a little about what you're looking for and see where that goes and who knows where it might lead.
Yeah, and now that like, Jalper also has a communication feature, so like if they are curious about like a specific company's specific role, or even like other students who have like a shared interest, I think, LinkedIn is, I wish Japanese people were more on LinkedIn, but unfortunately, it's pretty hard to find active people from Japanese market. So that might also be one avenue as well. And I'm also curious, like, I know the stereotypes about Japanese, like, especially large corporations, is that like very like traditional and like slow moving and hierarchical. And you now that you've mentioned like IDEO and you've worked like so many like large traditional companies and help them transform for like the 21st century, new types of businesses. So what is your observations around like how like large Japanese corporations work in terms of like decision making and maybe mobility for young talent as well?
There's still a lot of work to do. That's one reason why I'm back in Japan this time, is that there's still
Mm,
work to be done. There's a lot of interest in either replicating the magic of Silicon Valley in
mm,
Japan or at least getting inspired by it. In terms of business culture in Japan, it's still very consensus driven.
mm,
So there's a lot of meetings
mhm.
to have to arrange meetings to make
Meetings, summer
decisions.
meetings.
And so it can be very slow meetings
Mhm.
to have more meetings. And it can drive a person a little bit crazy. But you can also play your gaijin card and
Mm.
not join all of those meetings. Like, excuse yourself politely. Hey, do I need to be in that? Like, are you just
Mm.
going to talk about the same thing again, or can I join the last one?
Mhm.
And it can be tough, but that was part of the process. And you do need to get senior leadership on board with major change or transformation. But once they're on board, things can move well. Things can move, I wouldn't say quickly, but so things are done extremely well once they're moving in Japan.
Mhm.
The trick is to get them moving in a direction that is helpful. So there was a time when Japan was one of the most innovative cultures and societies on the
Mhm.
planet, bar none. And those companies are still around, many of them, and still very successful, but a lot of them have fallen into the trap of doing what they've always done because it's what they've always done.
Mhm.
And that was back in the 20th century.
Mhm.
Now we're in the 21st century. They have to break the model, and that's hard when the model has worked so well for so long. But it's also imperative if they're to survive the 21st and 22nd century. So the ways of working, the ways of management, the ways of leadership, the ways of producing, the ways of manufacturing, everything is different. And that can be really hard for big companies to
Mhm.
truly get their heads around and mobilize teams to explore and experiment with. But that's a challenge around the world.
Right.
I think that the real challenge in Japan is that there's a risk-averse culture by nature, and
Mhm.
um, it's about how to let go and be free and get out of your comfort zone, get into your growth zone, and try things, experiment, take risks, and
Mhm.
take smart risks. We're not risking the whole company by making small bets. That's why I think there are more innovation groups that are emerging in Japan. The problem with some of these innovation groups is they're still not given enough freedom and space to truly
Mm.
experiment for the future. And I think that's what a lot of people a lot of people from outside of Japan can bring is an
Mhm.
experimental mindset or a risk-taking mindset. It's okay to try things and to fail. Just like Thomas Edison failed 1,000 times before he built the working light bulb, or James Dyson built thousands of vacuum cleaners with that before he built the bagless vacuum cleaner that became the Dyson. That's the kind of mentality that it takes to create something truly innovative and truly new. And that's what a lot of Japanese companies need to remember how to do again.
Yeah, that's a great, great message to the, recruiters and hiring managers as well. I know, exactly for the things that you mentioned about Japanese companies trying to innovate and change, they are indeed like thinking about creating new roles, new teams, and like new ways of working to not only like survive with AI and all the, technological changes, but they're trying to kind of re-innovate themselves from scratch and actually thrive in this new economy. So that would be, exciting opportunities out there in Japan as well. And
Absolutely.
if you were to advise like young, current students, new grads, considering coming to Japan versus taking a job in their home country, especially, many students on JOLPR are going to the universities in the US. What are some criteria like decision making matrix that you would kind of give them to help them decide who will be a great fit to start their career in Japan?
I guess in my decision matrix, I would include things from home that I might miss if I were to move away
Mm,
from home, whether that's family or network or connections that you already have.
mhm,
That can be very helpful when you're starting your career and looking for your first jobs, versus all of the unknowns that will be the case if you were to move to a new place. Personally, I can only really vouch for going for the unknown. I think that's where the excitement is. I think that's
mhm,
where the learning and the stretch goals are. And when you're young, you've nothing to lose. Like you can
mhm,
always go back. You can always go home. So the days of Japan being this really foreign place for foreigners to go to, and there being zero English or zero English signage, all of those days are behind us. We've made a
mhm,
lot of progress where now in the train stations in Tokyo, certainly, and Osaka and Yokohama, and even some of the
mhm,
smaller cities also cater to people from English speaking, Chinese speaking, Korean speaking countries. There's a lot more of an infrastructure for foreigners in Japan than there ever has
mhm.
been. And so it's easier than it's ever been, and it should only get easier
Right.
to be a foreigner landing in Japan. It'll be a lot easier than it was for me 20 years ago. And that's a great thing. And I only have a lot of respect for those foreigners who came to Japan well before I came, because for
Mhm,
them, it must have just been like, what just happened? I mean, when I first arrived in Japan, I had to catch a train from my local train station to Shinjuku, which is one of the busiest train stations
mhm.
in the world. I think the
It
population
actually
of New
is the
Zealand,
busiest.
it is,
It's
it doesn't
actually is
surprise
the
me.
busiest, yeah.
The population of New Zealand moves through Shinjuku Station every day.
No way.
It's insane. So that just, from a scale perspective. But I got
Uh-huh.
off the train in Shinjuku and most of the signage was in Japanese and I must have just looked totally lost because I was. And this very kind man came up to me and he said, "Are you okay?" He had very little English. I had almost zero Japanese.
Mm,
I showed him my piece of paper. I said, "I'm trying to get to this building." He said, "Okay." And he took me there. He walked me to
mm.
the building, which was probably 20 minutes walk. So he took
Oh,
40
wow.
minutes out of his busy day to walk a foreigner to where the foreigner needed to go because he saw that the foreigner was lost. And that was one of my first experiences of living in Japan with people willing and able to help. And so from that point, I've just thought these people in Japan can be so kind. So things have only gotten even better since then, that more people are willing to help, there's more infrastructure. And so really, as a young person, there's nothing to lose by giving it a go.
Mhm,
There's various ways you can look for a job in Japan, whether that's going direct to a company that you've always wanted to work for. Nintendo, Sony, very hard to get jobs at, but I'm not saying you can't. Just might take a bit more perseverance. But you have something to offer. You have an outside perspective to offer. And all of these companies who are investing in innovation and investing in being a part of the global business community need foreigners because they bring a foreign perspective, need people with experience and education from outside Japan to bring something new. That's the reason I got that job at the traditional family-owned design agency is
mhm.
because they wanted foreign perspective. They wanted new ideas. They'd been working with the same domestic clients for 15, 20, 30 years, and their
Wow.
clients wanted new ideas. They were like, "Yeah, we saw this last year. What have you got?" And so they needed something fresh, something new. You can't help yourself if you're coming from the US. You can only bring something new. You can't bring the Japanese perspective. So you bring the foreign perspective. You bring an American perspective, which is very important and valuable in Japan. A lot of these companies, their biggest market is the US. So you already know their biggest market. That gives you an advantage over all of those thousands of people working in those companies who've never been to the US. So there's a lot that you can offer. And I think it's a matter of crafting your narrative, crafting your story, crafting your profile, and crafting, of course, your CV, your resume, your portfolio in a way that is attractive to the kinds of companies and teams and projects that you would like to be a part of. And then cold call. Find the people, send them an email, show an interest in what that company is doing, and show an interest in how you could bring value to that company. You might feel like you don't have enough years of experience yet, but you do. You have more experience than you might realize, and you have more value to offer than you might realize. So I would encourage people to take a moment to work with someone else or work on their own or both to try to capture the value that you think you could actually offer. And it is more than you believe you think to companies in Japan and why they might want to hire somebody like you. And if you can show that you have that type of proactive gumption and willingness to reach out and be helpful, then people will want to hire you. A lot of my hiring is based on attitude, not skills. You can teach
Mhm.
skills, you can't teach attitude. If someone comes in with a
Mhm.
bad attitude and a brilliant portfolio, that's a hard no because they're not going to fit in. They're not going to want to work with your team. They're not going to want to go along with your with what the team needs to be done. But if they come in with a great attitude and a willingness to learn new things, which, hey, a lot of young people are at that point, like there's still a lot of skills to learn, but
Mhm.
that's fine. The skills can be taught and still skills can be learned. And Japanese companies, Japanese companies are set up to train young people the skills they're going to need in the company. So that is not the concern. The concern is whether you have an attitude that shows that you are willing to take risks, shows that you are willing to experiment, shows that you are interested in helping a company to thrive in the future, shows an interest in the industry in which that company is working. And a lot of these big Japanese companies are cross industry, so that makes it even more interesting. My son the other day asked me, "What's Mitsubishi?" And I said, "Well, it's a big Japanese company. They do a lot of things." He was like what? Because he had seen the cars. I was like, well, our
Mhm.
refrigerator was made by Mitsubishi, Mitsubishi Electric, and there's
Mhm.
Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, and there's Mitsubishi Motors, and there's a lot of different Mitsubishi companies. And
Mhm.
Mitsubishi was three companies coming together back in the day. So a lot of these companies in Japan are massive. They might not be big by market cap like some of the big American or
Mhm.
European companies, but some of them are, like Toyota, huge, and they are far-reaching. They are across many, many industries. So
Mhm.
they are great opportunities for young people to build great careers within. And like we've talked, if you can find the people and the teams who are interested in working with foreigners, foreign markets, working in innovation, working in experimental new spaces, working with AI. I think AI is the great unlock for robotics in Japan. So I think
Mhm.
robotics and AI coming together will be huge in the coming years. And a lot of companies in Japan have their own flavor of robotics, whether that's Honda or Yamaha or Toyota. They all have robotics. And now that they have AI, their robotics are going to be next level. And so there's a
Mhm.
lot of opportunity. And there's opportunity across all industries. So
Mhm.
it's it's a domesticated market, but it's a very big market. And so that's a great opportunity, I think, for a lot of young people to consider for their careers.
Yeah. And one, I think, also critical thing that students are curious about is the pay. Like obviously the opportunities can be a lot more interesting because you, like you said, you are a niche. Like just by existing, you can be, filling that niche gap that a lot of companies need. But the reality is, with the exchange rate and just general, you know, like labor market wise, the salary in Japan will be generally lower than what you'll be getting paid by like Silicon Valley company or New York investment banking. And
Mm.
but at the same time the cost of living is a lot lower as well. So especially you raise your family in LA, which is one of the most expensive cities in the
Mm.
world, and now in Tokyo. So I'm curious about your perspective on the cost of living in like different places as well.
Yeah, the US is very expensive. It's not the reason we left LA, but
Mhm.
it was certainly helpful to leave LA. We were keen to buy a house in LA and we
Mhm.
looked for about a year and a half and just couldn't find something that we could both love and afford. It's out of control, and that's one of the American cities where it's out of control. The whole time I've been in or coming to Japan, Tokyo has often, I don't think it is anymore, but it was often at the top of the list in terms of most expensive cities. And maybe as a visitor, that's partly the case. Like if you stay at a beautiful hotel and you go out for dinner every
Hmm.
night and you go to fancy sushi restaurants, maybe I'm sure it gets very expensive, but living in Japan doesn't have to cost that much. You can eat around the corner for almost nothing, and it's really good food. We went to Italy and Greece one holiday, and we came back and we were still craving some Italian food. And so we just went around the corner to this little Italian restaurant, and no name, no Michelin stars or anything like that. And the food was maybe better than what we had in Italy. Like it was really good food. And we got talking to the chef, and he had spent 10 years training in Milan and
Hmm.
come back and made it his own and brought Japanese flavors and sensibilities. And the food he was making was amazing. And it cost almost nothing
Right.
relatively. So you can live very well in Japan and not have to spend a lot of money. Housing and rent is low in Japan relatively. I think so many cities, major cities around the world are pretty relative these days. It's very expensive
Mhm.
to live and work in London, um, but you also get paid relatively to that. So yes, inflation is a challenge and cost of living is a challenge in many parts of the world. And the yen is weak right now and compared to historical rates. The first challenge is, are you willing to give up the big salary in a city like Silicon Valley or New York? If money is important to you and high salary is important to you, then I'm not sure if Japan is the right place. But if experience and quality of projects and quality of life are important to you, then Japan's a fantastic place because it's one of the most, if not the most sophisticated cities or societies, I think, on the planet.
Yeah.
And so it depends, I think, on what's important to you, what's in your decision matrix in terms of things that you weigh higher than others. If it's money, maybe investment banking in New York City is your thing, and that's fine. We need that too. If it's quality of life, if it's personal experiences, if it's living abroad in a country that doesn't speak your language and being the outsider, being the minority, I think that is hugely rewarding for people to be the minority if they haven't been
Mhm.
in the past. If you didn't grow up the minority, give it a go because it allows you to see life from a different perspective yourself as well. And if you like a challenge, Tokyo's full of those. Like going to the convenience store can be challenging when you first get here. You don't recognize anything in that store, nothing in English. All the prices are in yen. You can't read any packaging. Like it's that in itself is an experience, and still to this day, like convenience store products change so frequently in Japan, seasonally,
Right.
weekly. That's part of living in Japan, is it's constantly changing and evolving, and I think it's always interesting.
Yeah, I think with that, like that is a great like overview of like your, very adventurous career all over the world. And, you're very grounded and like very aware of your own values and what matters to you. And hopefully, people listening to this can think about their own career and like what is right for them at the moment. And with that, I want to move us to the exciting lightning round, like the Lenny's podcast. So I prepared a couple questions for us to quickly go through. So, what are the two or three books that you recommend most to others, especially foreigners in Japan?
Man's Search for Meaning, I think, is a beautiful book by Viktor
Mhm.
Frankl, and I reread that on many occasions. Effectively experience of being a foreigner in Tokyo or in Japan. Somebody I follow is Craig Modd. He's a walker. He goes on a lot of long walks.
Mm.
He's also an author, a writer, a designer, a coder. He does a lot of different things, and he's built a following of people who enjoy his writing. He's self-published multiple books, both photography books and written books about life in Japan, about unique aspects of life in Japan, and especially
Hmm.
from the perspective of his walks, which are along some of the ancient walks of Japan where samurai and noble people used to ride their horses, whether it's the Nakasendo or the various other walks. And so he's somebody quite contemporary whose writing I really appreciate, where he's often commenting on being a foreigner in Japan and that experience in itself. And a lot of the people that go on walks with him are also foreigners in Japan with
Oh,
varying
wow.
levels of experience in Japan, some very deep experience of living and working in Japan as a foreigner. So those perspectives, I think, are also very helpful.
And do you have a favorite movie or TV show that resonated with you deeply?
I'm rewatching Star Wars with my kids just because it's
Mm.
fun. But it's also actually interesting to think, especially of the more contemporary Star Wars shows, how droids could well be a glimpse into the future of working
Hmm.
with AI-enabled robotics and R2D2 and C3PO and BB-8 being these amazing characters in our lives. They're not there to destroy humans, thankfully. It's a happy end in that
Right.
case. And so even thinking of it from that perspective, but also just from the entertainment value, I enjoyed that.
And is there a Japanese product that you recently discovered that you love?
Anything from Muji, I love.
Okay.
I know there are Muji stores outside of Japan, but
Hmm.
in Japan is just next level. Like the whole experience is Muji, and
Mm.
it's all done extremely well. And they've moved into food and clothing more recently, and I stick to a plant-based diet. So they even have some plant-based products, and some of their cookies are very good. I think they're probably only available in Japan at this point, but I'm not sure. So yeah, that's one reason to come. Um,
Definitely.
there are just so many. There are so many products and services in Japan that are to me the best in the world. There's
Hmm.
something about the Japanese sense for nature. A lot of color palettes stem from nature. A lot of the poetry comes out of nature. A lot of the beauty in Japan is from nature, and Japanese culture embraces nature and the seasonality of life uh, really, really beautifully and has done for centuries. And so it's hard to just pick one. I think there are so many, whether it's pottery from 17th generation families in Kyoto to more modern Muji things and Uniqlo
Hmm.
things. It's all amazing.
Yeah, I agree. The Japanese design is the best in the world, like for sure. And the final question, do you have a favorite like motto or Japanese phrase that you often come back to?
There are some really good ones because they're so convenient. I think this is maybe a stereotype, but I think Japanese culture generally is quite reserved, maybe not
Mm-hmm.
the most socially comfortable. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think over time there have been expressions that have developed to make things easier when you want to break the ice, or there's just that word or phrase you need to say exactly the right thing and for everyone to just get it. So
Mm-hmm.
there's things like "Otsukaresama deshita" after a
Mm-hmm.
day's work. Everybody knows what that means, and it means we all worked really hard today. Let's go have a beer or whatever it is you need to do after a hard day's work. You sit down in an izakaya in a Japanese pub with your colleagues after a hard day's work and
Mm-hmm.
とりあえずビール, meaning for starters, let's have a beer and everyone
Mm.
gets a drink. It doesn't have to be beer, it can be water,
Uh-huh.
whatever. But とりあえずビール is like for now, let's just get
Yeah.
a drink so we can kanpai, we can cheer, and we can congratulate each other on a hard day's work.
Hmm. Yeah, I almost took those for granted. It didn't even occur to me like those are like significant to like, foreigners like you.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Where can folks find you and how can listeners be useful to you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. My personal website, graphicalphabet.com, has some information about me and also a link to send me an email if you would like. But I guess LinkedIn is the place that I'm most active these days. How can people be useful to me? Once you've been through your decision matrix and you've weighed what's important to you, if you decide to come to Japan, ping me and
Mhm.
let's stay in touch. And I would be more than happy to introduce you to people I might know who can help you along your way, or anything of that nature. I think we're all just here to help one another thrive and succeed. And one of the things that I keep as a goal is prosperity for all of us. Um, Life is not a competition to me. And so if I can be helpful, if you decide to come to Japan, then I would love to do that. So feel free to cold email me, uh, and
Like you recommended so many
like I
times
recommend you
throughout.
do it to other people. I can only accept your emails to, and maybe just say that Misaki sent you, and we're you're on your way to Japan at some point.
Yeah, for anyone listening, Nathan is truly one of my like favorite human beings and like the closest mentors of mine. So, anyone who get to cold email Nathan will be lucky. So, highly recommend it.
Well, it's my
Um,
pleasure to speak with you too, Misaki.
yeah, well,
Always
thank you
enjoy
so
our
much, Nathan.
conversations.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming today.
Likewise, thank you.
Awesome.